I made a mistake. Or I kind of just made clickbait by accident. Back in December I made a video about the American Bison being too small in Planet Zoo. This is still true to some extent, but without realizing it, I made the issue appear much worse than it is. And we will also get back to the bison issue later, but I instead ended up looking even more into the weird heights and scaling issues that seem to be among many of the animals in Planet Zoo, especially those in the base game. Part of it being because of the Planet Zoo team mixing up head and shoulder heights. So I decided to make this yet another video about size issues in Planet Zoo, and I'll do my best to not end up fooling you this time, but let me know below if I do. There's a lot to talk about within this topic, so I will far from cover it all today, but I'll try to bring up some of the best, or should I say worst, examples in the game. Many of you probably know that the Bactrian camel used to be way too small. This issue got fixed right after we made a video about it. What seemed to be the core of this height issue was that shoulder heights got mixed up with the full height of the camel from the ground level to the top of the head. And for a long-necked animal like the camel, you'll lose quite a lot of centimeters if you don't include this part. And while it was great to see this issue getting fixed for the camel, Frontier sadly didn't investigate if this mistake was to be found among other base game species as well. Shoulder height is, after all, a very common way to measure animals standing on 4 legs. And yes, this head and shoulders mix-up was not only present with the camel. Let us look at the Okapi, because the Okapi is not okay. This is probably one of the best examples of this issue still in the game. A real male Okapi in the large end of the scale would measure around 1.7 meters at the shoulder. Here we got a 100% sized male Okapi in Planet Zoo. How exactly this system works I'm not totally sure about, but since 100% is the largest, you would assume it should represent the high end of the wheel size variation, right? And when we look at this fully grown Okapi here, the shoulder height is clearly completely off, not even reaching 1.5 meters, which should be the low end of the size for this creature. Instead, the head seems to be slightly above 1.5 meters. So this seems to be another bad case of the head and shoulders mix up. And even on the Planet Zoo merchandise, the Okapi looks weirdly small, though I'm not sure any of these animals are in the right scale. And this is not the only issue with the Okapi design, especially the weird placement of the shoulder is an issue, but I'll not go more into that today. I did try to see if I could find other base game hoofstocks affected by the head and shoulders effect, but I didn't really come by anything that stood out badly. Though I did only investigate the male models, as they tend to be the biggest. Don't take that sentence out of context. But there are other size issues to come for. A case where the female tends to be brought up is the Indian elephant. Female Indian elephants are typically described as having a shoulder height between 2 and 3 meters. The smallest individuals in Planet Zoo does get below 2 meters at the shoulder, so they are even smaller than they should be, and the larger ones just barely seems to go above 2 meters. So if you go for the largest female elephant in Planet Zoo, then it would fit the size of a small individual in real life. Something clearly doesn't add up here, but at least some individuals can appear somewhat realistic. Our 2 giant tortoises are also often called out for not living up to the name. I'll demonstrate with the Galapagos tortoise here. Here we don't use shoulder height, but go for the highest point of the animal instead. Here a Galapagos tortoise can reach just above 90 centimeters, almost 1 meter. The tortoise here is size 92% and it doesn't even reach half a meter. They're almost only half the size they should be. This is really not good enough for an animal named after its big size. But it's not always about the animals being too small. The hippo seems to be a case of an animal being too big. The 100% sized males seem to have a shoulder height of 2 meters. In real life, a big hippo would be around 1.65 meters or so. This is less problematic since if you go for the smaller sized one, then you do end up with animals within a realistic scale. 0% hippo seems to be around 1.6 meters or so, so they kinda match the large individuals in real life. And now it's time we get back to the bison as we talked about in my past video. This video has since become my most watched video on YouTube. Something I got a bit of mixed feelings about now, because a big part of the video is based on a mistake. Therefore, I need to come clean with you today. And make sure to like this video, so there's a bigger chance all the people that watch the bison video also ends up seeing this one. Both on the thumbnail and in the video, I used these two bison of different species to highlight the extreme size variation between them. And here is where the mistake happened. I was convinced I had put two males of size 50% into the habitat, but that wasn't the case. While the size at 50 is correct for both of the bison, it turns out that I somehow ended up with a female American bison instead of a male as intended. And since males for both species are bigger than the females, then comparing a male to a female makes the size gap appear even more extreme. It was never my intention to use cheap tricks like that, so I'm very sorry for lying to you by accident. And a shout out to this person on Reddit for insisting something was wrong with this picture. This doesn't mean the size for the bison is spot on. As mentioned in the other video, people have pointed out that the bison is too small, and they did that long before the bison showed up. But how bad is it then? I've lined up some new bison for you today. This time I've double checked the size and genders. This is not a head and shoulders case, since the head on the American bison hang quite low, but I think they might have gone with the shoulder height for the full height of the hump on the back, and I don't believe that is the case with the bison. The size range for the male American bison seems somewhat fitting for the female model, and then the male bison should be made bigger for this to add up. Bison can grow taller than American bison, so it makes sense that they are taller, but it should just be around 5 centimeters or so. And this does look like more than that, even though the hump makes it a little complicated to tell how much exactly. So this is maybe not really a huge enough gap to make a big deal out of it, as I kind of did, but the American bison just feels too small in Planet Zoo. So what exactly is the problem then? Part of the issue is the head. American bison have quite massive heads, and it doesn't really feel like this model hit those proportions right. Giving the bison a bigger head and maybe also some darker fur around the head would make them appear larger overall. American bison do also get a bit heavier than bisons, and when you compare the two in game you only sense a bit broader shoulder and maybe a bit more of a round belly on the American bison. But it's not really enough to make it appear heavier than the bison. When you combine all of this, too short shoulder height, the too small head and the body that doesn't feel massive enough, then I think you find the reason why the bison overall feel too small in Planet Zoo, and therefore to many people doesn't really appear as a very well made model. On top of that, the bison model also needs some sexual dimorphism. It's hard to say. The sexes appear too similar, even though the bull is larger in game, but in real life there's more differences between them than just the size, as you can see on these pictures. This problem even more adds to the male feeling too small. And this is also why I could end up with a female here without noticing it was indeed a female. One cool thing, besides from a lot of views and subscribers, that came out of this mistake I made was this person on Reddit getting inspired to make some really amazing scientific illustrations of the two bison species. The pictures came with a long post that also go into the differences between the two bison, both in real life and in Planet Zoo. I can only recommend you reading that if you really want to understand why the bison feel off in Planet Zoo. I'll put a link to it in the description. There's still lots of stuff to talk about when it comes to sizes and scaling in Planet Zoo. Some of it might go into a future video. I didn't really cover any of the carnivores this time, where I believe there also are height issues to come for. I also decided not to go too much into DLC animals, as the problems here tend to be of less priority than base game animals, especially now that the tapir is fixed. So to sum up some of the most important points of this video, the American bison probably need a complete redesign to ever end up feeling great. It's not only a matter of size, as I made it appear like in my former video. The Okapi is probably the animal I would prioritize if I had to choose the species that deserves a size fix the most. It is just very clearly designed wrongly and needs at least the same treatment as the Bactrian camel. Should we maybe talk more about the Okapi in another video? It might be a good idea to put some focus on it before supports end. And closely following the Okapi is the tortoises. They also very much deserve to get their size fixed. Thank you for stopping by here today. I hope my apology for messing up in the bison video is accepted, and I hope you want to hang out with me some more. If that is the case, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if I made any mistakes today, even though I really tried not to, then don't be afraid to tell me in the comments.